Okay. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Microsoft 2014 webcast. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. If you should need assistance during the call, please press star, then 0, and the operator will come back online to assist you. Thank you. Ms. Westmoreland, you may begin your conference.
Great. Thank you, Adrian. This is actually Heather Payton, and I'll be your host for today's event. I'd like to kick things off by saying good afternoon, or almost good afternoon if you're out on the West Coast, and welcoming you to today's event. I got a great event here today with partners from Scalability Experts and some of our own experts from CompuCom here. We're going to be going through the new features, business benefits of SQL 2014. Before we jump into agenda, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us, and hope you'll find this a valuable use of your time. Okay, so just a quick look at the agenda today. First, we're going to turn things over to Todd Peckett, who's the Director of Microsoft Solutions here at CompuCom, who's going to take us through a very quick overview of the Microsoft Cloud platform, what's Microsoft's perspective on the cloud, how SQL Azure tie to their cloud vision. Then we're going to have our featured presenter here, Rick Hagies from Scalability Experts, who's going to take us through features and benefits of SQL 2014. Then we're going to wrap up with a couple licensing slides from our in-house SQL licensing expert, Mr. Jonas Jasinskis. A quick wrap-up. We've got some more events we'll tell you about, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. Throughout the event, we encourage you to type your questions in. Asking a question on live meeting is very easy. All you need to do is click the little Q&A tab at the top. The Q&A window will open, and then you hit the Ask button. We've also filed some white papers and documents we'll talk more about at the end in our Documents folder. If you'd like to get a better view of any of today's slides, you can go ahead and click the little monitor on the bottom. We'll also enable the ability to print the slides to PDF at the end of the event, and we are recording today's event for future viewing. So before we move into the intro, I had some opening polls I wanted to ask you all to participate in. Our first opening poll: is this the first CompuCom webcast you've ever attended? Yes, no, don't remember? I can share those results. See who's out there today. And moving right along, our next poll: which of the following features are you most interested in learning more about? In-memory technology of OLTP, an enhanced separation of duties, online operations enhanced, a buffer pool extension to SSDs, always-on availability groups, column store index, or all of the above. And I'll share those results. And our next poll: what is your current experience with Microsoft Azure? Actively using, piloting, looking at use cases, not utilizing today? I'm sure this is one everyone's interested in. And we have two more opening polls. Is your organization using Hadoop as part of its big data strategy? Yes or no? And our last opening poll: has your organization implemented a Microsoft-powered BI solution? Yes, no, but piloting, no, but considering, no plans today to implement. And I'll go ahead and share those. And we thank you for participation in today's polls. Hopefully you found those a bit interesting. Okay, so I just want to spend about 1 minute doing a quick intro to CompuCom. Looks like we have a lot of people joining us for the first time. And I just want to talk a little bit about CompuCom. We've been around a lot longer than most people know, since 1987. We do a lot more things than most people know, with services in both the end user space, the data center cloud space, and then tied together by our service experience and management. Those are things like Service Desk, ITEL, project management. And one of our big differentiators is we're one of the few partners out there that can follow the whole IT life chain with services wrapped around those that you can kind of mix and mingle like Lego blocks. So whether you're looking to just procure a product with some implementation support, a larger scale project deployment, integration, multi-product rollout that requires multiple sites across the U.S. can help with that. Or whether you're looking for managed services, maybe around managed print or help desk, we've also got abilities there. And when you're ready to get rid of all the stuff, we can help you do that too. Just a few more stats that are interesting. We are #1 in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for end user devices. We manage over 4.25 million devices. We've got over 48 data centers on client sites that we help manage, and over 3,000 ITEL certs, which goes back to our project management expertise and ability to help with those large, complex deployments. We've also got a team of licensing experts. We are a Microsoft Gold partner, a Microsoft LAR. We can help with all your EA, Select, compliance, EA negotiations, all those fun things that we all love to do. Jonas is on that team, and you'll get to hear a little bit more from him at the end of the call. And the last thing I'm going to mention is we're going to be giving away some $50 Amazon cards at the end of the event, and I will be back later with that announcement, also to help with the Q&A. And I'd now like to turn it over to Todd Peckett, who's going to take us through the perspective. Todd?
Great, wonderful, and thanks everybody again for being here. This is actually a wonderful time for us to be in technology together. We're actually at a very unique time. It's pretty much a perfect storm. So first, let's talk about Microsoft's vision for a moment. Microsoft's vision is really around transforming the data center and really being able to unlock insight of data anywhere, empowering people and leveraging modern business apps with modern touch technology. And, you know, it's a relatively simple vision, but where it really comes together is in the execution. So we're really at the confluence of multiple game-changing technologies. We have Server 2012 and Hyper-V, which is really built from the ground up around virtual and cloud. We have SQL 2014, which is obviously the focus for today and is, from an architectural standpoint, just stunning, and we'll talk about some of those details. System Center 2012 is really the foundational framework for managing that infrastructure. And then Azure, which is really a very interesting element to the conversation today, as well as the conversation going forward about how organizations start to leverage the cloud and how to really make sense of where to start and how to move in that direction. And then finally, Office 365, which really ties in here very nicely around how to access and expose your data with deep insight. So what's really driving big data? I mean, we're really at a tipping point. I think last year we created more data than we have in the last 50 years. Real-time data creation, you know, everything from large data warehousing and massive parallel processing, video analytics, and all the things that make up the big data scenario. Multiple data types and different data sources. Some of those data sources can be within your confines of your data center, as well as rich public data sources and large volumes of data. You know, the growth is clearly exponential, and if you're on this call, you're probably dealing with that on a day-to-day basis. And we're really playing a balancing act with user expectation. A user expects to go online and basically type in a quick query and do a Bing search and have millions of rows of data reviewed and exceptionally provided to you in a quick and easy-to-consume fashion. So user expectation is growing, and the growth of data is growing. So how do we meet that demand? And it's really, once upon a time, we would talk about massive hardware and storage, and the economics behind that can be very challenging. We'd be looking at, I remember days of SQL where we just talk about add more spindles, put more expensive storage in the loop, and mobility being the ultimate consumer of this data. So really, where do we go from here, and how do we start to process that information and make sense of it? Well, integration with Office will give us definitely better insight. Finding and accessing a combination of external and internal components, and leveraging things like the Azure Marketplace, your one-stop shop for that premium data source for public data. Putting those things together for the end user becomes very, very powerful. So as we start to look at what our customers are actually talking to us about and what they're looking for, we start to develop a picture of where we are now and what our customers are asking for. And some of the biggest challenges are, what do we need to do to meet the demands of our business units? How do we grow our capabilities without necessarily growing our resources? Today, I don't see any organizations that I'm working with adding teams of resources, but yet there are tremendous amount of opportunity to take the data, the structured and unstructured data, and make sense of it. We need to determine really how to move to the cloud and when. And SQL 2014 and Azure fit perfectly into that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And we also need to evaluate how to best leverage the massive wave of new technology that's hitting the streets today. So Server 2012 is really at the heart of that, and SQL 2014 sitting on top of that makes a tremendous opportunity. So what's our approach? We really act from an organization standpoint as a consolidator, a source for our clients to assist them with the evaluation, the acquisition, and the deployment of some of these complex multi-product solutions. And integrating those all together are key and critical. Right? Now, CompuCom would be considered really one of your key infrastructure companies. And we also partner with partners like Scalability that are experts in this unique particular area. And we're going to talk about specifically how that fits together. We have to provide our clients with the opportunity to really look at taking advantage of the nuances of the technology. It's interesting when we look at SQL 2014, some of the elements of SQL 2014 will actually not require the development to be done any differently than it's done traditionally in earlier versions of SQL. So there's a very easy path to move into 2014. However, as we start to talk about some of the key new features, we talk about buffer pools and in-memory processing, deciding what tables should be in-memory processing versus maybe some that sits on a buffer pool and SSDs. Making those determinations and figuring out how to get the absolute most and best performance out of your infrastructure is why we partner together with Scalability Experts. I think it's important to also mention that in 2013, HP and Microsoft Frontline Partner Program has recognized Scalability Experts to be the Private Cloud and Virtualization Partner of the Year, as well as the Parallel Data Warehouse Appliance Partner of the Year. And those are pretty big titles, but what they really mean is that together with CompuCom, we can provide a total solution that includes the integration, project management, large deployment, and then very specific tuning and performance modifications to make SQL do all the things that you need to do. So with that, I'm going to hand our presentation over to Rick from Scalability Experts. Rick, please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. It's great to be here today, and thank you, everyone, for joining today as we talk about SQL Server 2014. And just to give you kind of an idea of who I am a solutions architect with Scalability Experts, been with the company now for 9 years, and I'm also very involved with the community through past. I served on the board of directors for 9 years, and I'm also a Microsoft SQL Server Most Valuable Professional. So with that, let's move on to really talk about what you're here to learn about, and that is some of the key features of SQL Server 2014. Probably one of the most popular things about 2014 that you've heard about is in-memory technology for OLTP. You may have read about something called Hackathon. That's what that is. Also, there's enhanced separation of duties. This will go over more of each one of these features here in the presentation. But basically, enhanced separation of duties basically is going to show us how we can be DBAs but not have access to the data. Sounds odd, but it's true. Also, they've enhanced online operations. We're going to talk about buffer pool extensions using solid-state storage devices. Always-on availability groups now supports up to 8 replicas. In 2012, it was only 4 replicas. And Resource Governor now has I/O governance as well as CPU and memory governance as well. And last but definitely not least, we're going to talk about column stored index enhancements as well in SQL Server 2014. It's a new exciting technology that's been enhanced in this version. So what I really want to do is position this as, things are not the same as they used to be. Looking back 10 years ago about where we were and where we are today can really help set the tone for why we need a data platform like SQL Server 2014. Because back in 2004, we had Windows Server 2003 R2. We had SQL Server 2000, which was primarily still a 32-bit program, unless you had an Titanium system. Most people didn't. That meant that also we didn't have these multi-core CPUs that we have all the time. Now, it's hard to buy a system that doesn't have at least 4 cores on it now per processor. And RAM, back then, 10 years ago, we had 4 gigs, maybe 8 gigs at best, sometimes a little bit more, but in order to get to that memory above 4 gigs, we had to do some stupid memory tricks in order to get there. Now, whenever I look out on the websites to entry-level database systems, usually they start at about 32 gigs and go up from there. Storage, our discussions back then were about, what RAID level do we have? How many spindles are behind that? It was usually direct attached storage or some type of rudimentary SAN. Today, just about everyone uses a SAN or has an SSD card in their server or have it in an array so that storage is no longer an issue. If you remember, we had these big monster CRTs that took up all of our desktops. Now we have flat panel displays, and usually multiple displays, so we can do more work. And back then, 300 gigabytes was a large database. Now, when I visit customers, a 1 terabyte database are not uncommon. And matter of fact, I'm working currently with a customer that has a 20 terabyte database. Again, OLTP type of system there. And virtualization back then was a novelty. You would never use it for production, just for playing around. Now, it's pervasive. It's a necessity. A lot of organizations virtualize their entire SQL Server workloads. And last but not least on here, high availability. The only option 10 years ago was basically clustering. We still have that today, but also there's database mirroring and always-on availability groups that add to that. And the database technology and the landscape has also changed. We have this information explosion of lots of machine data. It'd be great to have it in a relational data store, but often we see that other data stores are being used, such as NoSQL databases. And when you hear NoSQL, think about it as not only SQL, not that it's against SQL, it's just that they're using a different methodology to access that data. And SQL Server has also embraced this through Hadoop integration. Matter of fact, it's one of the key components within the Parallel Data Warehouse appliance, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's basically a prepackaged, commodity-based hardware solution with some really cool software to tackle big data warehouse problems. If you need more information, please contact us on that. Also, we said new HADR features that weren't available before, and cloud options as well. Database as a service, basically that's SQL Azure, is now available to us, and infrastructure as a service is also available. That's SQL Server on a Windows Azure VM. So it's just like having a VM in your environment, but it's up in the cloud instead. So what we're trying to get at is, over the years, as SQL Server has evolved, it's really brought more of a complete data platform to the end user. And with SQL Server 2014, we really reach the pinnacle of where we are so far and where we're going. So 3 main areas we're going to talk about are mission-critical performance. That's definitely a necessity when we talk about SQL Server. Faster insights from any data, and the hybrid cloud. So some of the things we're going to hit on here is talk about in-memory built-in, being secure, scalable, high availability, and mission-critical support. So when we say it's built in, that means that you don't have to buy something else in order to get the in-memory technology that's pervasive in SQL Server. And on average, when you utilize the in-memory technology, we get a 10x increase in performance. Not 10%, but 10x. And you get that by enabling a feature. You don't have to rewrite your entire application. You can really leverage what you already have within SQL Server. And it's flexible enough so you don't have to, to basically change your entire application. You can select what tables you want to use in memory in the case of in-memory OLTP. And also, we have the whole gamut covered from OLTP, data warehousing, and BI with the solution that we have here. Now, one thing I want to draw your attention to is a customer called BWin that you may have read in a case study. If you do some research on it online, you can get the complete story there. Basically, they had a session state table that was being hit by all the users who were hitting their website. They're a gambling website over in Europe. And it's very important that they keep that up to date, the session state information, or what their users are doing. And so that meant there's lots of latching and locking going on within that particular application. So they spent about 2 man-days basically changing the table to be a memory-optimized table. That's what we call it within the hackathon context. And they also modified several store procedures that access that data, and they put that into natively compiled code. Basically, it's just taking a T-SQL code and compiling it, making a DLL. Blazing fast speed, wicked fast speed. And they came up with about 16x improvement in the performance. So that's great, it's faster, but what the end result really was is that they could reduce the number of servers they were using to maintain that session state information. Therefore, they could reduce their licensing for all that as well. So it was a big to-do for them. So we talk about analytics, part of in-memory technology. It's not just SQL Server, it's also Excel. Excel 2013. We have Power Pivot in Excel. We have Power Query now as well, and Power Map is coming out as well. The column store index was first introduced in SQL Server 2012. We have the Fast Track Data Warehouse and the Parallel Data Warehouse. That continues on into SQL Server 2014. We have streaming data capabilities with Stream Insight, and of course with OLTP we have in-memory OLTP, and the new in-memory column store index, also called the clustered column store index, in 2014. So when we talk about in-memory OLTP, what does this mean? Well, I always used to think, hey, I have enough memory for my entire database to be in there. Why don't I just, that must be an in-memory OLTP database. No, it is not. Basically, it is when you have that type of situation going on where your entire database is in memory, you still have the metaphor of actually going to get a page of data and finding a row on that page and accessing that data. That's completely different now. It's integrated into SQL Server Relational Database. It's fully ACID compliant. It's a different way of accessing the data, but you can still use T-SQL code, so you can still leverage your investment in SQL Server. What you benefit from is low latency and much better improvement in terms of performance and scalability as well. And basically what the real driver here is that we have incredible hardware trends affecting, really driving this whole architecture. We have steadily declining memory prices for RAM, multi-core processors that seem to increase every year, but that's also hampered by a stalling CPU clock rate. We can only make CPUs go so fast before they start melting. And of course, businesses want to drive down TCO. So with these factors in mind, they really drive this architecture to fruition. So the thing you want to remember about Hackathon or in-memory OLTP is there's no need for an entire database to be in memory. You can just pick the specific tables that you want to be in memory. Other in-memory OLTP offerings from other competitors want you to buy a new product and put the entire database into memory, so it's different. You can still use T-SQL code to access that data, and you get better performance when you compile that code into native code using as a DLL. So you said, okay, we want to get rid of latching and locking because that was the thing that was really slowing down our access to that data within, even if it was within memory, we still had to do latching and locking to prevent other people from changing that data. So now we don't do any locking, we don't do any latching. We do something called row versioning that basically allows us to make the change, and then we check afterwards to see if we stepped on anyone's toes. So there's a validation that goes on after the fact to see if there's any conflict. If there is a conflict, then we have to address it. It's still fully ACID and durable. The log is streamed directly to disk as this is all happening. This is very fast, which is great. However, when you're looking at the activity monitor, often you miss stuff because it's so fast, because DMVs often do not measure things less than 1 millisecond in length. And the other thing you need to think about when using in-memory OLTP is that you need to monitor memory usage closely, just like you monitor disk space today for your databases. I want to talk about another feature that I really love here in SQL Server 2014, and that is the clustered column store index. Now, in SQL Server 2012, they introduced the column store index. It was non-clustered, and it made tremendous improvements in speed, often taking queries that took well over an hour down to just a few minutes. So that was great, incredible. However, once you put that non-clustered column store index on in SQL Server 2012, that table became read-only. You couldn't update it, you couldn't make any changes, whatever. But it still fit in properly with the traditional data warehousing scenario, where you did either updates on a nightly basis or a weekly basis or some periodic basis. You could drop that index or update your table or do some type of partition switching to get it into that table, re-enable the index, and you're good to go. That was great. However, what that meant is that for a period of time, it was non-updatable. In some scenarios, some customers could not really take advantage of that technology. So in 2014, we have the clustered column store index. It's tremendous speed, tremendous compression. I'm going to show you in the next slide here in a minute what type of compression you can expect. And it's completely updatable. Matter of fact, the clustered column store index is your base table. Matter of fact, there is no base table. Your clustered column store index is your data store for this type of thing. And also there's more data types are supported in SQL Server 2014 than they were in 2012. So we really want to draw your attention to the bar chart here on the right. This was a 100 million row table, and using traditional row store table with traditional indexing, it took about 20 gigs of space. And we could use page compression, or just have it without any indexes, or just have a table with a column store index. We get some other space savings that way. However, if we use a clustered column store instead of all these other methods, we get to save about 90% of our disk space usage. And that means real money when we're talking about enterprise class storage for our data warehouse. Plus, we're going to get better performance because we're doing fewer IOs, and when we do an IO, we're reading more data into memory at that time. Now, SQL Server is also very secure. Matter of fact, it's the least vulnerable database now for 5 years in a row. And it's not because no one's heard of us. Matter of fact, the SQL Server data platform is the most utilized database in the world with a 46% market share. And I remember one of the first times I first learned about SQL Server 2005, back then it was codenamed Yukon, Microsoft just got hit with the Slammer virus. And they took it very seriously. They were very embarrassed. They took all their developers and they sent them on their way to learn how to code securely. And that's really paid dividends in the future for the product and for the customers as well. So not only is it less vulnerable than other products out there, but they've also started to do things like enhanced separation of duties, transparent data encryption, and of course it has support for Windows Server Core as well. In other words, Windows without the GUI, which has a lot of updates to it when we do our Patch Tuesdays. So let's talk about separation of duties, for example. One of the things that I come into contact with, especially with larger financial institutions, but I'm also seeing it in other areas as well, It's the need to give a person access to do their job as a DBA, but restrict them from actually seeing the data that they're working with. This is kind of an odd concept, kind of foreign to us in the past because, hey, we're DBAs, we're system, SA equivalents, we're God, if you will. But we need to be able to understand regulatory requirements, and especially like with the NSA leaks, etc. We want to have our data secure. So they implemented this type of enhancement so that you can create your own roles in your organization to allow DBAs to do what they need to do to get their job done without seeing the data. Also, SQL Server is very scalable. And in many situations, we have SQL Server virtualized entirely within an organization. And you need a platform able to do that. Hyper-V is a great virtualization platform. You can have in Hyper-V up to 64 virtual CPUs and a terabyte of memory per VM. So that is one huge VM. And I think probably most of your SQL Server workloads will fit within that. If it doesn't, then you probably want to be on bare metal anyway. Also, network virtualization and storage virtualization also has added to the scalability storage as well. And SQL Server 2014 builds on top of that by having additional resource governance. Now we can have I/O governance as well as CPU and memory governance as well. This helps us prevent that noisy neighbor syndrome and really helps you prepare for migration to the cloud. Another item that is one of my favorites within SQL Server 2014 is what's called the buffer pool extension. And we can use SSDs in order to really make this happen. Think back to maybe days when you were using the OS and you had a page file that you used on your operating system in order to pretend that you had more memory than you actually did. Of course, this was convenient when you needed to have more memory, but also it was on slower disk, so it sometimes took a while to swap that in and out of memory. But now we're using SSDs, so it's going to be very quick and can take advantage of those low latency access to that data. And that's what they've done with the buffer pool extensions. Basically, pretend that we have more data for our buffer pool within SQL Server 2014. But it's also going to protect you from losing any data because only clean pages that are going to be stored in the BPE. Any pages that are dirty are going to be in the regular buffer pool. This means you can have potential performance gains, especially for read-heavy OLTP workloads. Let's say you're starting to do some heavy reporting on the same database that you're actually doing transactional stuff on. If you enable BPE, you may be able to keep that workload, the reporting workload, on that same system so you don't have to buy additional licenses for another SQL Server. And my favorite part of this is there's no application changes. You just enable the feature and go. Very simple syntax. And here's an example of the syntax. It's just a simple alter server configuration. You tell it where the BPE file is going to be and how big it is. There's a DMV to see how you're using it. And you can turn it off very easily, again, with an alter server configuration command. So very easy to implement, and it can save you some money on licensing as well. Also, one of the other things that they've done to improve scalability is the enhanced online operations. The main thing they've done here is with the ability to rebuild a partitioned index online. You were not able to do that before, so this will increase concurrency and application availability by taking advantage of that in SQL Server 2014. So let's talk about faster insights from any data. Now, we have data that we need to access. It might be on my laptop, it might be on the corporate SAN, it might be out on the internet world, right? And we have tools available to us now that are going to enable us to access that information wherever it is. And that's within Excel, that's inside Office 365. And we can also give access to mobile devices. So you can actually, if you're out and about and you want to take a look at some information that's very important to you, you can view it on your HTML5 compliant device. So it gives you a complete BI platform. So we have Excel, where you can discover, analyze, and visualize using Power BI, which is Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power Map, and share that within Office 365 with the Power BI sites. And there's a new feature, which I just saw a couple months ago, called the Natural Language Query. And I know, especially if you've been working with SQL Server for a long time, you think, oh no, it's that English query thing back from SQL Server 2000. It's not. It's much better than that, different interface altogether. So when you hear that, don't think English query, okay? It's not that. And again, you can access, mobile devices can access the information using HTML5 compliant devices such as Windows 8, the Surface RT, and even those fruity little tablets called iPads. Now, also talk about the hybrid cloud, because a lot of organizations, they don't want to go all cloud. That's very understandable. So, what is a right step in the direction of the cloud? In other words, why would I want to get to the cloud? Well, the cloud can be very beneficial from a cost point of view. You only pay for what you use, which is great. And often we hear people saying, well, my boss, or I'm directed to start using the cloud, but I don't know how or why I would want to do that. So one thing you can do easily that has value to it right away is you can actually do cloud backup. You can back up your systems to the cloud. Think about it. You could have your backups in the cloud so they're available to you to restore to your DR site, and they're safe and secure. Now, you can go another step forward and use a SQL Server on a Windows Azure VM and go with cloud disaster recovery. You could have that cloud be part of your replicas for always-on availability groups. And therefore, if you really need to, you can do a disaster failover to the cloud and still be up and running. And also, you can use the cloud to extend your application for global reach and better isolation of internal assets, so you're only paying again for what you're using in the cloud. So how do I get there? Well, of course, Microsoft is famous for its wizards and trying to make things very easy. So there's new migration wizards to help you migrate a SQL Server to a Windows Azure VM. Again, it's just the same type of VM that you have in your organization, but now you can have it in the cloud. You have full SQL Server functionality and full VM control, just like you do at home, if you will. Now, if you don't want to manage a VM, then maybe the Windows Azure SQL Database Service is for you. All you need to worry about is actually managing the database portion of it, and don't worry about the other pieces of the puzzle there. Again, it depends on your situation. But what this really does is this brings in traditional, what SQL Server 2014 does in the data platform, is it gives us our traditional non-virtualized SQL servers that we're all used to running, and our virtualized SQL servers, or our private cloud, combines that with off-premises, such as the Microsoft Cloud and third-party service providers, to give us a complete and consistent data platform across the spectrum. So that kind of wraps up the SQL Server 2014 portion, but I wanted to give you a little bit more background about Scalability Experts. We were founded in 2002. We're experts in data management, business intelligence, and basically the data platform. And we're Microsoft Gold Certified Partner, and most of our clients, or a great deal of our clients, you've heard of, Fortune 500 type companies. As a matter of fact, we've done business with over half of the Fortune 50 companies have relied on our solutions to help them with their data platform issues. And we have been recognized as a trusted advisor and a leader in the field. Just last year, we won the HP Microsoft Frontline Partner of the Year for private cloud and virtualization. And as you can see, we have a list of accolades going back over the years. So we're very well respected in the field. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jonas to talk a little bit more about licensing. Jonas?
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to keep my section brief. I think a lot of you on this call are most likely in the technical arena, being maybe DBAs or other types of individuals in your organization looking after these things. But it is good to know how SQL Server is structured as far as how Microsoft sells the product, and having an idea of, when you're looking at an environment, whether it be in the cloud, on-premise, or a combination of the two, what you're in for as far as how many licenses you're going to have to purchase. So I'm just going to go over some of the rules as we know them today. Now, 2014 is not here yet as far as SQL Server is concerned, and it will be here available for purchase in the not-too-distant future, but right now we are still, many companies are still grasping with the concept of how do we license even our 2012 servers. So, and as far as we know, none of this is going to change going into 2014. So I'll start first by talking about the two different modes that you can license SQL Server on-premise licensing with. The first is probably the one you're more familiar with. It is common across many server platforms in the Microsoft stack, and that's the server cow licensing model. So this is a model where you license each SQL Server in your environment, each SQL Server instance, whether it be virtual or on-premise, virtual or on hardware. And then you must purchase a cow for either each device or each user in the environment. You got to note that those cows, the client access licenses for SQL Server, they are universal, so they can go to any kind of SQL Server, whether you have a BI server in your environment and an enterprise server in your environment or a standard server in your environment. One cow will get you into any of those. Also, they are not concurrent. So Microsoft does not have any concurrent licensing model. So, of course, if you have a group of 50 people and you think only 20 will ever access that on a regular basis, if all 50 people do need access to that SQL at some point, they will need a cow. The other mode of licensing, and it's the one that came about with the release of 2012, is the licensing per core model. So the way Microsoft changed this, it used to be per processor, per physical socket. The advantage of doing this kind of licensing is that you take away the requirement to have to purchase cows in your environment, which is quite handy if you have an unknown number of individuals hitting those servers or a very large number of individuals hitting those servers. Then you don't have to sit there and manage, okay, we need this many cows, we're going to be into it for either a very large sticker price or there's just no way for us to know the number. With the change to per core licensing, what we're looking at is, instead of course going with the physical socket, now we're dealing with the number of computing threads that are being thrown at that instance of SQL. So in the physical processor world, it's quite simple. If you're putting it on a physical machine, you simply count up the number of physical cores being allocated to the job of SQL, and with a minimum of 4 cores, and you're off to the races. Of course, and Microsoft actually does this in increments of 2. So if you have an 8-core machine and you've allocated 6 physical cores to the job of SQL on that server, you can allocate 6 cores. You can't go lower than 4, but you can go higher if you need to. The editions, just so you know, SQL Server Standard Edition can be purchased in either Server Cow mode or in per core mode. If you choose to go BI, Business Intelligence mode, you can only get that in Server Cow. And in enterprise mode, you can only go per core. They actually did away with the Server Cow model of enterprise once 2012 was released. A little on the virtualization and cloud piece in SQL. So I talked about the server and cow, and I talked about core. So for the server cow mode, each instance of SQL Server will require its own server license, even if it's a virtual machine. In core mode, again, each VM must have a minimum of 4 core licenses for those instances. Now, if you're running a high availability type environment, you're running a cluster, you are allowed to have 1 passive node for every active licensed node in your cluster. So if you have, that's fairly self-explanatory, but if you do have that kind of example, you are allowed to do that with 1 license as opposed to having to buy 2. Virtual machine mobility in a data center. This one I do get a lot, and I have a lot of companies asking me about it. So you've got your VM in a server farm, and of course the big advantage of having it in a virtualized place is being able to have failover, load balancing between machines, have it move around. The only way you can do that is to purchase software assurance and have active software assurance on that license. For those of you who don't know what software assurance is, that's Microsoft's maintenance package that is available on all of their licensing. So if you're looking at SQL in your virtualized environment and you want to move that from host to host in a live migration type of scenario, you are going to need software assurance. Same thing goes for cloud mobility. So if you want to move your VM to and from the cloud or to your third-party provider and back, or even around in a third-party cloud or Azure, you are going to need software assurance on those licenses. Last for Azure, and I thought I'd touch on this. So there's a couple different ways you can go about getting SQL within an Azure environment. One, of course, is what you can purchase SQL directly through Azure. You can actually choose it from their virtual machine library and spin it up, and you would pay the per minute rate of SQL. There's a calculator, actually. If you go to Bing and you type in Azure Calculator or Microsoft Azure Calculator, there's a full calculator there that will have with sliders and the whole, but it's very pretty. But essentially, it will give you a very good idea of what kind of price tag you're in for. And based on the size of the database you have and how much compute you would need. The other way to go, of course, is to rev it up on a Windows machine that's in Azure. So, of course, this would be the same as on-prem licensing. You would license it the same way. You would have to have software assurance because it is in a cloud environment. And in that way, you would own the SQL license, even if you tried to pull it, even if you wanted to pull out of the cloud environment and put it back on-premise. So there are some advantages to doing it that way as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to, I believe Heather Payton is up next.
Yeah, Jonas, before you do that, a quick point for everybody out there. It's pretty exciting. I talk about we're at an interesting time. I just want to make sure that everybody is aware. Microsoft, about 3 or 4 days ago, just released an announcement that they're going to be reducing the cost of Azure storage by 50%, and I think that's coming out on March 13th. So, really this is an unbelievable opportunity, and if you start to think about, well, I really need to start to move to the cloud, I need to reduce my capital exposure and expenditures, I can't necessarily buy a lot of new hardware, I need to reduce my operational tasks and leverage the cloud, using the cloud in Azure specifically for disaster recovery and high availability, leveraging lower cost storage, really provides a seamless experience for your support staff that essentially will use the same methodology they do today to manage their on-premise architecture to manage the instance sitting in Azure. So it really is a great opportunity. With that, Heather, I'll hand it back to you as well.
Great, thanks. So I see we have some questions in the queue, so we're going to move through these last few slides pretty quickly. But you may be wondering, what's next? A lot of content, a lot of new features. So I'd like to make you aware of some offerings that we'll be putting out there as to the people that attend this event. One, experts from Scalability and CompuCom are available for a free consultation if you just kind of want to bounce some ideas, talk about where you are, challenges you're facing, and where you want to go. This might be a good fit. There's also a half-day big data executive briefing that Scalability Experts has been doing with clients to kind of help them understand the different technologies out there, how they would integrate, and what type of ROI they could see. And then also we want to mention for those of you who are looking at migrations from older products, competitive migrations from Oracle to SQL, migrations that you might be acquiring a lot of new servers or licenses from HP, Microsoft. There are funding programs out there where Microsoft HP will contribute to the SOW, POC work done to stand up the solution with your organization. So all things to think about. And then lastly, I want to mention we've got 3 more events coming up. For those of you who have the joy of also managing the licensing and not only the technology, we'll be doing licensing review in a couple weeks. Then we'll be talking about migrating from Oracle to SQL, and then we'll be back with switching from VMware to Microsoft Virtualization. So we're going to move right into the questions now. We've got a few in the line. I'd like to remind you at this point, if you would like to ask a question, it's real simple. Just go ahead and use the Q&A panel and type in your questions, and we'll go ahead and start with the questions that we have in the queue right now. Okay, our first question. What are the challenges expected for cloud computing for financial industries based on application and security challenges such as cybersecurity resolved? Todd, Rick, you guys want to tag team on that one?
Yeah, so I'll start with part of that. So, clearly this is always a concern. And in the financial industry, in light of, recent data breaches and concerns about just general cybercrime, this is at the top of mind. In particular, as we see the evolution of SQL continuing to be very focused on security and encryption, we see a lot of opportunities to really leverage the architecture and encryption to reduce that surface area. Also, a lot of customers ask about Microsoft's security profile and compliance. Microsoft provides a very, very good detailed security document and outline that typically is more significant than almost any other third-party provider from a cloud perspective. So I would definitely look at that and provide you with that information. And as a follow-up, I'd be happy to send anybody on this call that particular document that I'm referring to. And I'll also ask the rest of the team to comment on the security elements.
Yeah, and this is Rick, and so as you said, that is a very much a concern, not just for the financial industry, but for just about anybody out there, because especially with the NSA leak type of thing, and where is the data? But at some point, at somewhere, you're going to have a trust issue with either your internal folks, with a hosting provider that's maybe managing your data center, or with the public cloud. There's going to be some point where you need to have trust. And as time goes on, we'll see as it's proven out to be more and more secure, it's going to be more comfortable to move into the public cloud, and especially with an ROI, with just paying for what you use in the cloud. That's the whole beauty of that.
Okay, great. So our next question, what is the minimum OS? Is it Windows 2012 R2 or Windows 2008? SQL 2014 will work with. Is online partition index available in SQL Server 2012? So it looks like a two-part question there.
Okay. Yeah, so first thing, online partition index is not available in SQL Server 2012. It is only available in SQL Server 2014. And as far as the minimum OS requirements are concerned for SQL Server 2014, I don't think they've announced them yet, but I'm very confident that it will not be certified for Windows Server 2008. Probably the minimum requirements would be Windows Server 2012. Probably not R2 because it was just released recently, but I believe that the bare minimum requirements would be Windows Server 2012.
Okay. And our next question, will the debugger be available for developers in this new version?
That one I would have to look up and check into. I am more on the DBA side and less on the developer side, so I haven't concentrated in that area. But if we can get your contact information, we'll follow up with you.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and get back with you with an answer on that. Okay, those are the questions I see in my queue. Todd, do you see anything?
Yes, I do have a couple of questions that have been either directed to me via instant messaging, thank you, Charlie, and a couple of other methods. So one question is, we are starting to look at Azure, yes, and we'd like to know how we could work together with CompuCom's Scalability Experts. Okay, that's a good question. For many organizations, Azure is becoming more and more interesting. We see that lots of transactions from a licensing standpoint with Microsoft is driving customers to look at and to spend more time from an Azure standpoint. So the first thing I would do is before we would talk about technology, we'd probably want to first sit down and do some type of information gathering / envisioning workshop to really understand your applications, some of your business requirements, and then we can simply look at the technology that makes most sense and absolutely Scalability Experts and CompuCom can work together jointly. I think we had a slide earlier that talked about a briefing and a workshop, and typically these are great places to start because they give you an opportunity to really look at the architecture first, working together with your team, and provide some of our knowledge and best practice. And quite frankly, I think with SQL 2014, Scalability Experts really makes a tremendous partnership with CompuCom, because as we've talked about, how do you decide, what table needs to be in memory? I mean, a lot of people asked in our early questions what were the top features. The in-memory processing and OLTP is obviously a key thing, but I didn't see anybody really spend a lot of time asking about the in-memory or in-memory column store. And really, that is one of the areas that are going to provide some of the most substantial performance enhancements. So the way to start is get in touch with us, either respond to any of the emails that you've received inviting you to this event, and then myself, along with Scalability Experts teammate, will join in an enhanced conversation of where to start.
Okay, so it looks like I'm going to jump around here. So we're at the event time, so I'm going to jump out. I see a question from Randy, whether or not recording the call. Yes, we are, Randy. I'm going to jump out to the closing polls, announce the winners, and then we'll come back for the Q&A for those of you who have some time to stay with us, but I want to be conscientious of your time today. So if you wouldn't mind grabbing your mouse again and providing us with some feedback. Our first closing poll, are you considering any of the following projects in the next 12 months? Oracle to SQL migration, SQL upgrade, big data BI solution, moving app dev environment to cloud Azure, or all of the above? And our next closing poll. What would you be most interested in receiving a follow-up call on? Setting up a 1-hour consultation, SQL licensing, setting up a BI SQL pilot, Azure and other cloud solutions, migrating from Oracle to SQL, CompuCom infrastructure solutions, or all of the above? And 2 more to let us know how we did today. Overall, how would you rate today's event? Exceeded expectations, met expectations, or below expectations? And our last closing poll. Would you attend another event of this type, yes or no? And again, thank you for your feedback. Let us know how we did. Let our partners like Microsoft know how we're doing for them too. Okay, jumping back to the Q&A, I do want to announce the winners quick today of the $50 gift cards. We're going to give away 10 cards. Please forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Our first winner, Bruce Anderson. Second winner, Krishna Nerpeti. Third winner, Dale Rowland. Fourth winner, Norman Jan. Fifth winner, Quan Tran. Sixth winner, Jim Andrews. Next we have Aneth Jayaram. Next, Joe Hodge, Blake Call, and Dave Schaefer. So congratulations to our winner. You'll be receiving a communication from us on how we'll deliver your $50 Amazon gift card. And then, so also want to thank those of you who have joined us who may have to drop off as we continue with a couple questions here. So we do have one more question in the queue. Oh, sorry. It was just, can you please share the PowerPoint? So sure. Let me enable the ability to print the slide to PDF. So for those of you who would like to print a copy of today's slides, I have enabled that ability. It's very easy. When you're looking at your screen, you'll see a little printer right down here in the corner. You click that, you'll get a take-home copy of the slides to share with your friends, family, and children. I'm sure they'll really enjoy that. Also want to mention we put some good white papers up in the documents folder, including a white paper on the Microsoft Parallel Data Warehouse and some information on Scalability's database as a service, which is pretty cool stuff also. So I encourage you to take a look at those. I will send out a follow-up email with the recording link, and you'll also be able to get to the white papers from that page also. I don't see any more questions in the queue at this point, and we are at the event end time. So I again would like to remind you of our upcoming webcast. We hope to see you back on one of those. If you have any additional questions at all, please feel free to respond directly to any of the follow-up communications you've received from myself or the follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow. And with that, I'd like to wish you all a great day. Hope to see you at another event.